Despite stakeholders from across the criminal justice spectrum hoping to tackle the implementation of New York's Raise the Age law in this year's budget negotiations, the youth justice debate has been largely absent from conversations at the Capitol. But progressives are still beating the drum for the issue, calling for $50 million to flow from the Youth Justice Innovation Fund to community-based organizations to provide a range of alternatives to detention and incarceration for New Yorkers between ages 12 and 25. For more on the campaign, including the struggle to spend money allocated for youth justice work, we're joined in the Capitol Press Room studio by Assemblymember Gabriella Romero, an Albany Democrat and former public defender. Welcome back to the show, Assemblymember.
Hello, happy Friday.
Happy Friday to you and all who celebrate. So let's talk about the status quo in Albany, which has been that about $1.7 billion committed for the Raise the Age initiative has only seen about a third of that money spent since the law was passed nearly a decade ago. What do you make of the current flow of funds, as well as where the money has actually been spent? Because I think an argument could be made that it's been almost contrary to the intent of the initiative.
Right. So when we passed Raise the Age, there was a simple concept that children, when they are arrested, are supposed to be inundated with resources. They're supposed to have a overwhelming amount of support. Community-based organizations specifically are supposed to be rich with resources to help the child not commit additional crimes. And what we're seeing is that the majority of the money that's going out is being spent on incarceratory resources, whether it's detention or probation. And so there's a bill that I sponsor, the Youth Justice Innovation Fund, that's supposed to take $50 million of the $250 million allotted for Raise the Age funds and make that money go directly towards the community-based organizations so that the children can have, a real opportunity to thrive. And what we're really seeing on the ground is that the model for these funds is that reimbursable model that's very common for state grants. So we want to flip that on its head, go through DCJS.
The Department of Criminal Justice Services, or maybe Division, I think?
Yeah.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah, well, DCJS. And we want to make sure that those CBOs, community-based organizations, are able to get access to the funds that they need directly so that the children can get access to the funds and the resources, in that inundated type way.
So my understanding is that reimbursement model, the idea of having people put up the funds first, while it's a headache, it does speak to the credibility of certain organizations, that they have the capacity to raise money, they have the capacity or track record of spending money. What do you think of that argument, which does almost disenfranchise smaller organizations that don't have the resources to begin with?
I hear what you're saying, and I understand where you're coming from, but DCJS as an entity has the ability to screen organizations to invest in effective, evidence-based programs that are able to invest properly in these areas that need investment. So what you're saying is, how can we make sure that our taxpayer dollars and our money is going to places that will use those resources effectively, right? I agree with you. DCGS will be able to screen the community-based organizations to make sure that they're able to handle those funds and do so in a way that is evidence-backed and effective, as DCGS has done in prior programs, specifically in adult-based programs that are alternative to incarceration-based. So this system has been done before through DCJS. We just want to replicate it, and we want to replicate it for children who deserve an investment-based model like this.
There's the case to be made that during the status quo that we've seen for nearly a decade, it's fallen upon the counties to prioritize the spending of this money, that it's up to them to say, this is how we want to approach the implementation of this issue. So is there anything that stopped them from prioritizing spending on community-based organizations and their diversion programs, their alternatives to incarceration?
Nothing is stopping the counties. We have found some counties are prioritizing incarceratory models, i.e., spending that money on probation or incarceration. And what we want, the way that the legislation was written, the spirit of Raise the Age, we want our money and our tax dollars to go towards credible messenger and outreach and peer supports. We want the funds to go towards counseling and family functional therapy. We want our money to go towards things that we know prevent kids from entering the criminal legal system, things that prevent recidivism, things that are evidence-based. These programs work, and the full $50 million would amount to just about $1 million per county to spend on these prevention, alternative to detention, and incarceration, wraparound services types programs. And that is, again, the spirit of Raise the Age. That's the point of Raise the Age.
So what you're advocating for is taking away the authority of the counties, at least some of the authority of the counties, the level of government that is much more closely aligned with the people, the bottom-up approach to spending discretion, and handing that over to a state-administered fund, essentially a top-down approach to spending.
I am not concerned, especially because DCJS has implemented programs like this before. And we're not taking away people's Raise the Age funds, for the record.
Well, a portion of them.
Well, the counties can still use the majority of their funds how they feel like it. We are just saying that $50 million of the $250 needs to be spent towards community-based organizations, and DCJS will be the ones implementing that specific type of programming. And I think that that will be a successful program because it has been successful in the past.
So in the course of this interview, you've made the argument that, quote, these programs work, quote, has been successful in the past. And I don't think people would argue with the philosophy behind these alternatives to incarceration as having a track record of working. I think what people might say does not have a track record are some of the organizations that are looking to spend money, because it's one thing to advocate for an issue. It's another thing to actually be responsible for implementing it. So what sort of accountability measures should be put in place for this if we are going to reverse the model of handing out money from that reimbursement model to here's the check and we trust you?
I trust DCJS to develop the mechanisms to both evaluate the programs and identify what is effective, because they are truly not only at the forefront but have scaled models before. I think that's a very not only legitimate question, but one that needs to be figured out. And I trust DCJS to identify and regulate those CBOs. And for the record, they'll stop and end funding if there are issues. That's the point of them being there as a state agency.
So I imagine in some large counties like Albany, Erie, Monroe, Onondaga, etc., there are organizations that have the capacity to take on the responsibility that we've been talking about to implement these alternatives to incarceration. But what about the capacity in smaller counties, rural counties, the Essex counties of the world?
DCGS would be able to provide the technical assistance to rural, but also communities that just might not have the literal infrastructure, by expanding those services, scaling what's existingly there, and then replicating existing in other places evidence-based models.
So we're speaking on March 27th. Theoretically, a budget is due March 31st. We both know that's not going to be the drop-down deadline. So what do you think is the appetite for pushing something like this into the budget? I mean, is there a real appetite? Are you hearing from Assembly leadership, for example, that this type of issue is still on the table? Where do things stand with this?
We just had a press conference a few days ago, and there was a lot of folks there. I'm not going to speak for leadership, but I think that It was mentioned not only in the Senate One House, but also in the Assembly One House. And there's great momentum to address this in this year's budget because we are seeing good numbers in our public safety numbers. We are seeing crime go down, but that is a momentum that we need to capitalize on. This is a program that would be very timely to continue to invest in our children.
As I mentioned at the top, the raise the age issue was a hot button point of discussion across the ideological spectrum heading into this year's budget negotiations, with not just progressive criminal justice advocates like yourself looking for some of the changes we talked about, but district attorneys looking for changes as well that they say would let them do their jobs a little easier. As you think about getting your own priorities across the finish line, what do you think about the idea of trying to incorporate some of the concerns of district attorneys, even if they might not be what you're looking to prioritize or you're opposed to them, as part of building a broader coalition so that you can get what you want across the finish line? Does that sort of horse trading make sense to you?
Not on this issue. I have some other bills that have broad support from the district attorneys and defenders groups, but on this specific issue, I don't believe that we need a broad coalition. I think that the folks that are on this issue, the folks that are supporting it, are in the right place. We have the data behind us, and the coalition that exists is strong, and we are right.
And after a quick break, we'll turn our attention to the outstanding issues in the state budget with Assemblymember Gabriella Romero, an Albany Democrat.
Support for the Capitol Press Room is provided in part by the Lawsuit Reform Alliance of New York. Fraud and lawsuit abuse impact car insurance costs for New Yorkers. Reforms are being proposed to mitigate their impact. Information on these reforms is available at keepnewyorkaffordable.org.
Support for the Capitol Press Room comes from O'Donnell & Associates, a public affairs firm providing strategic guidance to businesses and nonprofits on navigating policy and regulatory issues. More information is available at o'donnellsolutions.com. This is WCNY's The Capitol Press Room, and we're continuing our conversation with Assemblymember Gabriella Romero, an Albany Democrat and former public defender, who was talking before the break about redirecting county funding for New York's Raise the Age initiative and creating a state-administered Youth Justice Innovation Fund to spend on alternatives to incarceration administered by community-based organizations. Since I've got you here, this is your second budget as a member of the Assembly, and I'm curious how you feel the process is going, or maybe your ability to navigate this process with a budget under your belt now.
I feel like this budget is very different from last year. It's very niche. It's different, but I am really grateful that I feel I'm feeling heard on the issues that matter to my district, and I'm hopeful that there are the issues that matter most. Immigration. I'm hopeful that we're going to get a comprehensive package that is real and substantive. I'm hopeful that we'll get a balanced something on SECRA, and there are some things that my local, hyper-local things that I'm hoping to get out of this budget as well. Albany's in a fiscal crisis. The New York State Mesonet is a life-saving concept housed at UAlbany that helps many different state agencies, and it needs money. Those are things, just two small concepts that are mentioned in both houses and are on the table in this budget. Probably won't even talk about them towards the end, but, really big things that are big to me that are going to be in this budget. And, the Youth Justice Innovation Fund, big. Another big bill of mine is in the immigration package as well. These are just, things I didn't expect, but are on the table in this budget, as opposed to last year. I was just fighting for my life on Discovery. niche specific things in this budget that I'm fighting for that feel different than last year.
On the immigration front, do you think that's something that has to get done in the context of the budget, or is there enough appetite amongst the legislature, and particularly the Senate and Assembly, to just tackle this as a two-house solution?
I would rather have it be done as soon as possible.
Which would probably be before the budget.
Well, people need real relief. And there are people that are relying on us as lawmakers to not only do the right thing, meaning do a comprehensive, real, substantive reform, but also do the right thing as soon as possible. And I don't know if that's going to happen. I hope it happens as soon as possible is what I'm hoping for, but I don't, the clock's ticking.
And lastly, are you drawing any firm lines in the sand on any outstanding policy issues for the budget, or do you see room for compromise on all of the outstanding issues, the big four being immigration that we just talked about, the seeker reforms that you mentioned, the governor's effort to change the implementation of the climate law, and then the fight over car insurance rates? I mean, are any of those ones where you're like, no, I can't, no wiggle room here, or are they all ones where it's like, you have to look at things holistically, you have to be, realistic about what this budget process is like and the governor's powers over it?
Wow, David, you're really just hitting all the points today. So I, first and foremost, I am looking out for my district. Albany is in a fiscal crisis. We have a $35 million deficit. And so that is probably my number one priority in this budget, is making sure that I'm able to get the money that my city needs to make payroll. So that is my number one priority, period. Moving on. I am also making sure that I'm, balancing that with obviously the statewide and larger exponential crises that you just mentioned. Hard lines are hard for me. I haven't even been brought the CLCPA modifications that have been talked about. So, I care deeply about the climate. I care deeply about our climate goals, but I don't know we have not conferenced those yet. So when I am brought those issues, I will take an opinion on them. But
that's a savvy answer of a second-year assembly member now.
I'm just telling you, I haven't been brought anything to conference. So I care deeply about the climate. I haven't been brought anything yet. When I'm brought it, I'll give you an opinion, bring me back. I'm happy to talk about it, but I just have nothing to talk about at this point, which is frustrating, I'll be honest with you.
Again, because the budget's due in 4 days.
Well, no comment. And immigration, I'm even happy that the governor came out with an immigration package. She is leading on that. Proud that she included my bill to create the state cause of action to sue federal officials. Which
you can hear more about in the Capitol Press Room archives at capitolpressroom.org.
And that was really brave of her to do. But the reality is that New Yorkers want her to go further, and we need to go further, because we are in a moment where we and New Yorkers deserve true and real reform. So proud of her for doing that. But I do believe we can and must go farther than what she proposed. And that is where we are, again, have not also, would love to see more language there, but believe we can push the needle farther than what she proposed. So looking forward to conferencing that as well. What were the other ones? Car insurance, I'll be honest, I'm just very deferential to my colleague Jen Lunsford on that. So,
which you can hear more of on the Capitol Press Room archives at capitolpressroom.org.
Yeah, true. And so I am very interested in making sure people get money back in their wallets. That is something I've talked about a lot in my own town halls in my district. And so anything we can do to make sure that people get that is important to me. But also it's such a niche topic that, I'm doing my best to understand and sift through the thousands of constituent emails on it.
I mean, it's unrealistic to think that lawmakers are going to be experts on the myriad of issues. And so it's actually kind of interesting to hear you talk about deferring to one of your colleagues who is a trial lawyer who has clearly spent a lot of time in this, and it's just an interesting perspective.
Yeah, so, and it's normal. A lot of colleagues are experts on certain things, so I listen to a lot of the things that she has been saying as someone who literally has litigated this exact topic multiple times. And so, what was your last one?
Seeker, but you could always just pass.
No,
we could always pretend
I'm
move
transparent.
on. Okay.
So the concept of Seeker is, cutting the red tape and balancing the need for new development while also making sure that there's a codified community input and environmental concern. On its face, sounds great. But I've heard from constituents who are like a little concerned about fast tracking projects. But then I've also heard from a town supervisor in my district who used to be a seeker attorney who says it's great. So also haven't conferenced that yet, but I would be interested to hear more explicit details about what we're actually truly looking at there. It's a concept that, I would love to fast track projects. We need new housing. I don't think that that's necessarily a big issue in my district, that projects are being held up for 4 or 5 years, as the governor mentioned, is the reason for that specific proposal. But if that is happening across New York State, I would like to hear from those members and maybe why they think that this proposal needs to happen and if they are someone that supports it. So.
Well, we've been speaking with Assemblymember Gabriella Romero. She is an Albany Democrat and former public defender. Assemblymember, thank you so much for making the time. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Support for Capitol Press Room comes from National Fuel, working to help customers understand what drives energy bills, from taxes and state-mandated programs to market-driven price increases for natural gas, which utilities don't profit from. More information at betterplansnobands.com.
And by New York State United Teachers, a statewide union of nearly 700,000 professionals in education and healthcare.